Hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Twisted Tale Studio channel, the horror agnostic channel where we talk about spooky stories from all four corners of the horror pop culture globe. Summer is just around the corner, and you know what that means. It's time to get together our summer reading list. And what summer reading list wouldn't be complete without a good, old-fashioned murder mystery? Today we are going to be talking about a book that the internet algorithm just really kept shoving down my throat. I feel like I kept seeing it on my recommendation list for my Goodreads, my Audible account, my Kobo store. Today we are talking about The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. I mean, to be fair to the internet algorithm, they were actually kind of right. This is definitely right up my alley. I'm a big fan of true crime and supernatural, and this book has a little bit of both all rolled into one. Yeah, cards on the table. I'm one of those basic bitches who really likes a good true crime Netflix documentary, or maybe like a ghost hunting documentary. This book has both of them all rolled into one. In my defense, I come by it naturally. My mom watches nothing but true crime reenactments, and she falls asleep to that stuff on the couch, out cold, which I totally haven't done while watching the Ted Bundy documentary. Like, that was probably the best couch nap I've ever taken. I don't know what it is about true crime documentaries, but they're really easy to fall asleep to. Like, I think I have a problem. Anyway, where was I? Right. The Sundown Motel, otherwise known as, hey, you got some supernatural in my true crime mystery. Yeah, I recommend this book for anybody who just can't really decide on which of those two genres they feel like reading, so you can just read both in one go. As per usual, I'm going to start this video with a little bit of background on the author and the publication history of the book. Then we will go into a surface level overview of the plot and keep it nice and spoiler free for everybody. I will give you guys plenty of warning when we get to the point where there's going to be spoilers, so if you are interested in the book and you want to read it, you can pause it at that point, come back to my video. I promise I will still be here when you finish it. So, without further ado, this is my review of The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. As far as timely reviews go, I'm a little bit late to this party. The Sundown Motel was actually published back in February of 2020. As far as books go, it was received pretty well by fans and critics alike. It's currently rocking a 4.3 out of 5 on Goodreads, a 4.04 out of 5 on Audible and Amazon, and a 4.5 out of 5 on Kobo, if you're a Kobo person like me. According to her website, Simone St. James is from my neck of the woods, close to Toronto, Ontario. The Sundown Motel is her most recent release, but she does have a few other books, I think 4 or 5 other books under her belt as well. She definitely has a type. She has a genre that she likes. Going through her previous books and reading through the synopsis, I haven't actually read any of them myself, so I'm going purely off the descriptions in Goodreads and Amazon here. She really, really likes her murder mysteries with a little bit of a supernatural flair. At least that's the impression that I'm getting from the synopses and how they're worded. I was definitely seeing the correlation between her previous works and her most recent work, which is The Sundown Motel. Her first book is The Haunting of Maddie Clare, which was released in 2012, and it's about a woman post-World War II, by the sounds of things, who is assisting a ghost hunter investigating the event of a young woman who committed suicide in a barn. And there's a real serious suggestion that there are ghosts involved, but again, this is just the synopsis. Her most recent book, previous to The Sundown Motel, was The Broken Girls, which was released in 2018. It also looks like it was quite popular. It's rocking a 4 or higher on all the websites that I was able to find. And I gotta say, I got a little bit of deja vu when reading the synopsis for The Broken Girls. It's another book where it's following a dual timeline. One in the past, I believe it said it was like the 1950s, and then one is a little bit more modern in the 2010s. It's all about a reporter who's writing a story about a condemned, it looks like it's a girls' boarding school or a girls' like correctional facility. So this reporter is writing all about the building when it's come up that this building's going to be renovated and reopened. And it's very heavily suggesting that there's going to be ghosts involved too in the wording of the synopsis. So I may or may not have added this to my to-read list on Goodreads as well. So, Simone has a formula. I'm not knocking it. On the contrary, I'm giving her some respect here. Most authors, let's be honest, find a niche and then work within it. They'll push the boundaries, but ultimately a lot of them stay where they're comfortable. I mean, if Stephen King can have literally every book he writes set in Maine with like a very similar sort of cast of characters each time, then I think we can let Simone St. James have her ghost mysteries. And with all that fun stuff out of the way, it's time to talk about plot. The story of the Sundown Motel goes thusly. Picture it. Fell, New York, 1982. Viv Delaney is a young wannabe actress on her way to the Big Apple to try and find her big break. Along the way, she runs a little low on funds, so when she needs to stay the night at a motel, she makes a deal with the motel owner to watch the desk for a night in exchange for a place to crash for a few hours. One night at the motel turns into weeks, and soon Viv has found herself slipping into the routine of being the Sundown Motel's night clerk. But she quickly begins to realize there's something not quite right. The strange, unexplained things happening around the building while she's alone at the desk at night and everyone has gone to sleep. She can't help but somehow feel that she's in danger. Picture it. Fell, New York. The year is 2017, and a young Carly Kirk has rolled into town looking to investigate what happened to her Aunt Viv when she disappeared back in the year 1982. To solve the mystery, she will follow Viv's footsteps, including living in Viv's old apartment and accepting a job as the Sundown Motel's new night clerk. When history begins to repeat itself, Carly will find herself facing the same dangers as her missing aunt did all those years ago. Okie dokie, so from here on out we are getting into spoiler territory. If that synopsis sounds like something you want to read and you haven't read this book already, pause the video here, go get yourself a copy. This YouTube video will be here when you get back. And now on with the spoilers. So, as you've probably guessed, this book bounces back and forth between two separate timelines. The first timeline being with Viv in 1982 when she first arrived in Fell, and then it also follows her niece Carly in 2017, and we basically get to advance the plot through Viv while Carly follows along playing catch-up but taking all the credit for solving the mystery. The number one question I see online a lot in regards to this book is this a crime thriller or is this a supernatural thriller? And like, as I've been saying, I confirm to everyone here that yes, it is both. The main thread of the plot is a true crime-esque thriller where you've got both of our main characters trying to solve a murder mystery that is happening in this small town. And then there's ghosts thrown in there mostly for flavor. But I mean, the ghosts do serve as Viv's jumping off point into initially looking into this murder in the first place, so I guess they do really serve the plot now and then. This storyline is basically, she takes the job at the motel and then she starts encountering the motel's ghosts. There are 3 of them that she finds. The first one being a small boy who, I believe, hit his head at the pool and then eventually died of his injuries, of his head injury. The second ghost is one of the previous night clerks, actually. He died of a stroke or a heart attack inside the office where she works, so occasionally she'll smell the man's cigarette smoke when she knows he's out and about. And then the last ghost that she encounters actually is the one that drives the plot. It's the ghost of a murdered woman whose body was dumped at the site of the Sundown Motel back when it was being constructed. Through looking into the past of this one woman ghost at the motel, she discovers that there's somewhat of a link between her and 2 other unsolved murders that happened in the town around the same time. So then Viv proceeds, obviously, to do what the local police should have been doing this whole time, and follow up on the reports of a door-to-door salesman who was seen at one of the crime scenes. With a little bit of sleuthing and a few phone calls, pretending to be somebody that she's not, she finds out where the door-to-door salesman works and how he's potentially connected to all 3 murders. And, did I mention that this guy was also a regular at the Sundown Motel? And mysteriously, whenever this guy shows up is when the freakiest stuff starts happening, so I wonder what that's about. Viv basically starts stalking this guy, and through her little investigation, she rightfully figures out that this potential serial murderer has his eye on a really young teenage girl. So, like any responsible person, she goes to the one cop she's friends with in town who works nights, but she doesn't have enough evidence to actually bring this forward to open up a case or any sort of investigation. Instead, Viv ends up settling by making a bunch of anonymous phone calls, trying to get this young girl's parents just to keep more of an eye on her. It doesn't end up working. The kid ends up being murdered and her body is dumped on the side of the highway, I believe. Meanwhile, like I said, in Carly's timeline, she's mostly playing catch up with whatever Viv is doing. She does investigations of her own into the old library and looking at the old newspapers there, where she meets this local kid who's super helpful and who's also very interested in looking through all the old archived newspapers. She ends up talking to a whole bunch of people that Viv knew and people who knew the victims, and basically you get to hear secondhand the results of all of the stuff that Viv was trying to do. Putting a pin in Carly for now, back in the interesting side of the story, Viv is working her night shift at the Sundown Motel when the salesman shows up and he signs in with a fake name like he always does. And Viv knows this is her one good chance to try and get some real evidence that this guy's connected to these murdered women. So she bribes one of the other people staying at the motel, who's like a drug dealer or some odd thing, to distract the serial killer, get him out of the room for a while so she can go through his stuff and see if he's got any evidence on him. Well, as it turns out, the serial killer has half a brain, so she's in the room going through his stuff. He comes back and catches her red-handed. The motel starts freaking out because obviously this guy is the murderer of one of the ghosts, and the ghost is pissed that he's here. And that manages to create just enough of a distraction that Viv manages to stab the guy a couple of times before he's able to murder her. Of course, there's one big problem with what just happened here. Unfortunately, Viv still doesn't have enough evidence to open any sort of investigation on this guy, so she's here alone at the Sundown Motel with a dead body. She has no way to prove it was self-defense, really. She has no evidence to suggest that he was connected to any of the murders. He's not going to be able to confess anymore, not that he seemed particularly inclined to do that anyway. But, lucky for Viv, the 2 people who show up first are a photographer that she's friends with, as well as the night cop who she's also friends with, and they are okay with helping her hide the body. And then, big spoiler alert, this is the big twist at the end of the book, Viv never died, she never went missing, she ran away, she went into hiding. So yeah, Viv is on the run, goes into hiding, trying to avoid getting arrested, potentially for murdering a murderer. And we fast forward back again to Carly, who is following the breadcrumbs, putting things together. Her and her friends end up finding the salesman's car, which the cop and Viv and the photographer hid in a barn out in the middle of nowhere, and his body is in the trunk. So that all gets uncovered, and then right after that, it's revealed that the super helpful local kid who's been hanging around at the library was actually the serial killer's grandson, and he's not too happy that his grandfather was murdered by Viv, and apparently, I don't know, serial killer tendencies run in this family because he's got a few screws loose, let's just say that. This kid ends up following Viv back to the Sundown Motel, where he attacks her by trying to shove her into the unused pool. And lucky for her, this guy who's been staying at the motel, who is Carly's love interest, chases the guy off. Carly gets up, gets out of the pool. She's a bit banged up, but she's not too worse for wear. And that's when Viv shows back up. She gets in Viv's car and they drive away, apparently forgetting all about this love interest character. I mean, fair enough. This guy doesn't do a whole lot for the plot, really. He's around to kind of be a red herring for like all of 10 seconds and then kind of just be all lovey-dovey with Carly. Yeah, I'd forget about him and drive away too, I suppose. But in the car, Viv fills Carly in on everything that she's missing. She explains what she's been doing for the past 30-odd years. She obviously moved away, laid low for a while, changed her name, all of that, and then actually ended up moving back to Fell, and 0 people recognized her. So you're telling me that this disappearance of a white girl in New York, which the author specifically mentioned was featured on true crime podcasts and in several newspapers, went unsolved with the supposed murder victim living in the town where she disappeared from. I don't buy it. It doesn't sound like the true crime community that I know that just nitpick through every little thing that they can find in order to solve these cold cases. Like, I mean, if we can find Luca Magnotta based off some really low quality background audio and a vacuum cleaner and a shitty YouTube video, I feel like somebody walking through Fell might come across Viv just walking out of a coffee shop and recognize her. Okay, so back to the actual plot. With Carly and Viv, they realize that, hey, maybe we should go check on love interest whose name that I clearly just can't remember because bleh. Maybe we should go back and check and make sure that he isn't hurt. So they end up going back to the Sundown Motel, and by the time they show up, love interest is fine. He's a little bit pissed that he got left behind, but I don't really blame him there. And the grandson of the serial killer has been killed by the ghosts, presumably off screen. And that's pretty much the end of the book. The book ends with Viv turning herself in after all these years and confessing to what happened on that night. She leaves herself to the mercy of the justice system, but I mean, she's already said at this point that she has late-stage cancer, so the chances of her living long enough to actually serve a sentence if she is convicted is, like, spotty at best. And Carly, it sounds like she moves to Fell full-time and has a relationship with love interest dude and just goes about her life. So now on to my final thoughts about the Sundown Motel. I guess you can probably tell by the tone of this whole review that I liked this book. It was a fun read. It's not all that long, and I chewed through it so fast. The pacing's really good. It kicks off super fast. Like, even in the prologue, when you're seeing Viv, you know that, like, something creepy's happening, and even shortly after you see Viv and Carly both arrive at the Sundown Motel, like, spooky stuff's starting right away. We're hitting the ground running. The main characters are fine. They're great. I love them both. Obviously, though, Viv is my favorite of the two, and she is swole from carrying this whole plot on her back by herself. Is this book perfect? No, not by any means. There's a few things I would have personally changed that's not obvious. Love interest dude, it just kind of didn't do it for me. I feel like you could have given all of his lines to Carly's roommate and nothing of value would have been lost there. He's basically there to be a red herring for a few seconds and for Carly to bounce ideas off of, which she was also doing with her roommate as well anyway, so why is he there? Him having his white knight moment at the end of the book, I feel like, was also a missed opportunity for having Carly witness the final antagonist's death at the end. Because love interest dude chases off the serial killer's grandson. They run into the woods. They do their thing, presumably come back to the hotel where the ghosts kill him, and Carly is off talking to Viv. So I feel like that was a bit of a letdown, personally. Love interest dude being kind of like bleh leads into my second gripe, was that I just wish that the ending had a little bit more punch. Let's just call it punch. I was a little disappointed by the fact that our white knight swooped in, chased off the bad guy at the end, who didn't end up really doing much other than pushing her into the pool, now that I think about it, which is kind of a disappointment. But I feel like you could have had Carly there at the motel actually witnessing what happens. I feel like you could have just had Viv swoop in and like scare the guy off, and then eventually Viv and Carly witness him being murdered by the ghosts of the motel instead of it happening off screen. I feel like that was a huge missed opportunity. It would have been way more interesting. But that's just my opinion. When I rated this on Goodreads, I gave it a 5, which I feel okay in keeping. I'm a few weeks departed from this book, and I still feel good about keeping that 5 out of 5. There is no perfect book, in my opinion, and I'm particularly hard on endings. I find endings with horror books and movies and what have you are really difficult to nail. So if I'm having a good time all the way through and the ending is still somewhat satisfactory, I call that a net win. And honestly, just based on how fast I ended up reading this, like, if I'm not gonna rate this a 5, then no book I rate is going to be a 5 out of 5. So yeah, in conclusion, recommend. Definitely recommend. Nice murder mystery with some ghosts. Can't go wrong, in my opinion. And as per usual, I would like to end this video with a word from our sponsors. Me. I have a Redbubble account where I post new designs weekly. This week's design will appear in this void above my hand for future me to edit it in. So if you guys check that out and you see any designs that you like, pick something up. Maybe some stickers, maybe a t-shirt, whatever you guys want. I'm just a tiny little channel, so any little bit helps me out quite a lot. And speaking of little channels, you want to know what else really helps out little channels like me and is totally free? Hitting the subscribe button and then hitting the thumbs up down below will help get this video in front of more eyes and get more traffic directed to my channel. I really want to make a community that I can talk about my favorite books and comics and TV shows with. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, just doing a little thing like subscribing means the absolute world to me. And that's all I have for you guys today. Comment below this video and let me know what is on your summer reading list. I need ideas. Let me know. I will see you guys next time. Bye!